Story 1. Family betrayed me in court, causing me to lose my son's custody. Now they need my help, after my ex betrayed them too. I secretly recorded them confessing everything. Hi, so this is going to be kind of long because there is a lot of context that I have to mention for everything to make sense. I, 33F, got divorced a couple of months ago, but it had been in the works for almost a year. I met my ex-husband, James, through friends when I was 25, and after dating for 2 years, we decided to move in together and get married. His family was a little conservative and traditional and did not approve of live-in relationships, so we had to get married if we wanted to stay together. And I really liked James, so I didn't see a problem marrying him. My parents were also on board with that decision, and so we got married within a year of living together. I found out that I was pregnant, and we were overjoyed. It felt like our family was really coming together, and everything was kind of falling into place. But unfortunately, when I announced that I was pregnant, my in-laws started pressuring me to quit my job and focus on being a mother. It didn't make it any easier that my job was not very lenient with maternity leave, and since it hadn't really been a long time that I had been working with them, my maternity leave would be especially short. So, at the time, I weighed the pros against the cons and decided to quit my job. It was not a decision that I made alone. Everybody had been a part of it. James and his parents kept telling me that it would be the best decision in the long run, and I simply had to do it. James seemed pretty sure of everything and said that he would take care of the family. I didn't have to worry about the money. He would bring enough home, and all that I had to think about was raising our kid. My parents and my older brother also thought that it would be for the best if I quit my job and stayed at home, because that's what my mother had done, and even though she had the choice of going back to work, she chose not to because this was a priority for her. I had a lot of pressure on me from both sides of the family, so I decided to quit when I was in my second trimester. Everything had been going well, and I had full faith in my husband that he would never let me down, which is why I left my flourishing career to be a stay-at-home mom. However, soon after my son was born, I realized that there was something strange about the way James had been behaving in the last few months of my pregnancy. I could never quite put my finger on it, but there was something off about his energy and everything. Sure, he seemed happy when our son was born, and I thought things would go back to normal, but instead, it started getting worse. He started being very irritable around me, and any time I would try to talk to him, he would just snap at me. The only time that he seemed happy and content with life was when he was playing with our son, but other than that, it always felt like he was very annoyed to be at home with me, so he would spend long hours at work, and even on the weekends, he would consistently come up with some excuse not to spend time with me. I just couldn't understand what was going wrong, but I kept trying my best to make our marriage work because, unlike him, I loved him, and I didn't want to give up on us. This trend continued for about 2 years after my son was born. He would stay at work for way longer than he needed to, and even when he was at home, he wasn't really with me. I couldn't exactly complain about it because every time I would try to talk to him about it, he would just tell me that he was really tired from work and it was not an easy task for him to be the sole breadwinner for the household. And that was really insulting for me because it wasn't as though I was not capable of bringing home money for myself, but I had to rely on him because he had promised me that he would make it easy on me. A couple of times, I even asked him if he would prefer for me to go back to work so then we could split all the expenses, and he wouldn't have to take so much pressure, but he said that it was an insult to him and his capabilities. Besides, my in-laws would never approve of it, and we would be in for a really hard time with them if I went back to work. So I continued to stay at home and raise my son, which is pretty much the only thing that brought me joy because James had changed, and he was no longer the man that I had married. It was only about a year ago that I found out that James had actually been having an affair with one of his coworkers. It had been majorly difficult for me to find out about because, honestly, I had been kind of suspicious about it for a long time. I had even snooped through his phone and laptop a couple of times when he was asleep, but I found nothing. I knew all his passwords because he wrote them down in his notepad, but even that didn't help. It almost felt like he had nothing to hide, and I felt like an idiot for even being suspicious of him. I even went through his belongings to look for a burner phone or whatever, but I again found nothing. At one point, I had actually started to believe that maybe I was just being paranoid and insecure, but the universe had my back, and the proof of his cheating was something that I saw for myself. James and I were throwing our son a pretty grand birthday party about a year ago, and he had invited the coworker he had been cheating on me with. She was a single mother with a son around my son's age, so I didn't find it strange that he had invited her. He had also told me that she was a really close friend of his, so I didn't find it unnecessary at all. After my son had cut his birthday cake, I decided to go to the upstairs bedroom because I wanted to change into something more comfortable for the party. But when I walked into my bedroom, I realized that my husband was already in there, and so was his coworker on his lap. They were full on making out when I walked in on them, and it took me a couple of minutes to even process what I was witnessing. First of all, it was my bedroom that the two of them were going at it in, and that was the most horrifying part of it. And secondly, they didn't even break apart when they heard the door opening, so I had to walk all the way over to them and make my presence felt for them to snap out of it. I'm pretty sure that they thought that it would be fun to make out in my bedroom in my house just for the thrill of it, but they probably didn't count on me having a complete breakdown over it. I'm not proud of it, but knowing that what I had been suspecting for so long was actually true made something snap inside of me. I grabbed the coworker by her hair and started dragging her outside the room, and I was unstoppable. From what I was told, James is considerably stronger than me, but he couldn't stop me, and I don't even remember most of it because I think I had a rage blackout. I dragged her downstairs with me, with James right behind me, and pushed her into the middle of the room while everyone was there. I don't remember most of the things that I said, but apparently, I called her a bunch of derogatory names and told everybody what she and James had been getting up to in my bedroom. I didn't even care that my son was right there and so were a bunch of his friends. Now that I look back on it, it's extremely embarrassing and inappropriate, but at the time that didn't even occur to me, and I was just screaming at the top of my lungs. My parents, my brother, and my in-laws were also present there, and I think it was my father who finally calmed me down and took me back to my room. Once I was inside my room, I completely broke down and started crying. I was sobbing uncontrollably, but instead of staying with me and comforting me, my dad locked me inside my room and went back out. I guess I should have known instantly that my parents didn't care about me. I had always known that they cared more about appearances than being real, but that was just insane. Nobody came to check up on me for the next couple of hours, and even after I had calmed down considerably, I had no idea what was going on outside. I didn't even have my phone, so I couldn't even ask anyone. It was only after midnight that I was escorted out of the room by my brother, who didn't even ask me how I was doing. They probably would have made me stay in the room for longer if I hadn't started banging on it like a crazy person. When I came out, I asked my brother what had happened after I had been locked in, and he told me that pretty much everyone cleared out after my breakdown. He also said that James had left with his parents and my son, and the only people in the house at the time were me, my parents, and him, and he had let me out of the room so we could discuss what we were going to do about this now. But my family's idea of a discussion meant telling me that I had to apologize to all my guests for the way that I had behaved at the party. And not just that, but I also had to apologize to my in-laws and James for what I did. They told me that he had found it extremely difficult to convince his coworker not to press charges against me because what I had done was an act of physical violence against her. So now I owed it to him to talk about this and work things through instead of making this a big deal. I freaked out at them and told them to get out of my house because I was not going to allow them to stand under my roof and tell me that I had to apologize to my cheating husband. I got into a huge fight with my family because they were telling me that I owed it to him to make things right and give this marriage a second shot, or else they would cut ties with me. So I told them to go ahead because I had reached a point where I couldn't care less about what anybody else thought of me. I was going to file for divorce and get out of this mess, and I didn't need anybody's permission for it. So I contacted a lawyer the very next day and filed for divorce within a week of the incident. James was served soon after, and he actually had the audacity to be disappointed and shocked. He came back home the day that he was served with the divorce papers and demanded an explanation. I told him that there was no way that I was going to take him back after what he had done and the way he had insulted me. We got into a nasty verbal argument where I said a lot of things to him and called him a lot of names, and he ended up promising me that I would never be able to see my son again, but I didn't realize that he would actually ensure that he lived up to his words. Then the legal battle began. The divorce proceedings were easier and simpler compared to the custody battle since we had very few joint assets to speak of. The house belonged to me, and there was no question about it because I had purchased it with my own money. Everything else was going to be sold, and the cost would be split between the two of us. We just had to wait for 6 months due to the waiting period in our state, and after that, once we had come to a settlement, the divorce would come through. The only thing that we couldn't agree upon was the alimony that was due because I had to start from scratch since he had forced me to quit my job and I didn't have enough money of my own. He thought that I shouldn't get any alimony at all, but of course that was not possible since he had told me that he was going to help me and make sure that I never felt the need to work. Thankfully, I had a couple of texts to prove that, or else I might not even have been able to get that alimony. The divorce process was emotionally easier for me to deal with because, in my head, I had already disconnected from James, but the custody battle is what really screwed me up because, unfortunately, my parents and my brother decided to stab me in the back for money. My ex-husband and his lawyer were horrible people who started making a case against me for being a terribly careless and psychotic mother to prove that I was not capable enough of handling the task of raising my son on my own. So James and his parents were supposed to have full custody. Now, I assumed that my parents and brother had to be bought out by my ex-in-laws because they were seriously loaded, and I couldn't think of any other explanation as to why they would turn on me. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they even started sucking up to my in-laws in the first place because of their money. Anyway, James accused me of being incapable and unfit to raise our son and demanded full custody because apparently, I was a functioning alcoholic with serious anger issues. They made up several incidents where apparently, I had lost my temper and put my son at risk of being hurt. Of course, none of that had ever happened, but they needed to do something to make me look like the bad guy. I thought that at least some people would be on my side on this, but all my friends decided to take his side on this, and I think a lot of that had to do with my breakdown at my son's birthday party. But the worst betrayal of it all was when my parents and my brother also testified in court against me and claimed that I needed rehab and serious intensive therapy before I was even allowed to be near my son because I was clearly not in my right state of mind, and that was probably also what had driven James to cheat on me because he was sick of dealing with me. So unfortunately, even though I put up a good fight with my lawyer, I was unable to get custody of my son. The cards were stacked against me, and there was very little that I could do to prevent the inevitable. My lawyer and I had been trying our best to put together scraps of evidence to prove that I was a good mother, but eventually, all of it went to waste. The verdict was announced a couple of months ago, and that was the last time that I saw my son in person. I did get supervised visiting rights, but James never let me see him anyway, so it's kind of pointless. He is 4 years old now, but he barely even gets to meet me, and I'm constantly afraid that he's going to forget about me when he grows up. From what I know from a couple of relatives who are still on my side, my family still gets to see him since they post pictures with my son all the time. James and my son are still living with my in-laws, and basically everybody gets to see him but me. I can't imagine something more heartbreaking than that. I had been living solely off of the memories of my son and myself, believing that at least he was taken care of by James because I don't think I would have been able to give him a nice life on my salary since I'm just starting out. I was able to get a job in my friend's company, but it's a startup and they don't really make much as of now, so my salary is not what one would expect from a woman in her 30s, and even the other employees, they are all in their early 20s, just there for the experience so they can move on to better opportunities. I do get alimony every month, but it's really not enough because I still have to maintain the lifestyle I was living before, and I can't exactly live like a bachelor and cut costs. But this is all I have right now because of the massive gap in my resume. I had believed that once I cleaned up my act, I would apply for shared custody again, and maybe I would stand a chance then, but the opportunity literally fell into my lap a couple of weeks ago when my parents reached out to me after months of not being on speaking terms to ask me for help. The help that they needed was that they needed me to bail them out because, surprisingly, James was not the wonderful guy that they had believed him to be. My brother sent me an email saying that I needed to come over to their place ASAP because they had realized something huge and they wanted me to know because they were sick of hiding things from me and wanted to be a part of my life again. I tried to ignore that email that day, but I couldn't stop thinking that maybe this would help me with my son, so I went over to their place in the evening. When I did go, I had expected them to be living like kings because they had sold me out for money from my ex-in-laws, but if anything, they were living worse than before. My son was thrilled to see me though, so that was the cherry on top of a fantastic evening when I visited my family that day. They literally started begging for forgiveness as soon as I walked in the door because apparently they had realized how badly they had screwed up and there was no going back, but still wanted me to forgive them. After the divorce, when they approached my ex-in-laws and James to ask about the money that they had been promised, James told my family that that was not happening anymore. Apparently, it had only been insinuated that they would be compensated handsomely if they turned against me and testified in their favor, but there was nothing in writing to prove it, and if my family tried to backtrack and tell me about all of this, then they would just make sure that they never saw my son again. So, for the sake of my son, they decided to keep their mouth shut even though they were not even getting paid for it like they had been promised. But it got worse because they had been used terribly, and not only had they been manipulated to testify against me, but they were also being treated like free babysitters. James would drop our son off at my parents' place every single day, and they had to watch him while sacrificing their own time. It was highly inconvenient because even my dad and my brother had jobs to attend to, and my mother couldn't handle all the household work and looking after her grandson all by herself because she was getting old. So either my dad or my brother would have to work from home every day, and it was becoming really difficult for them, which is why they had contacted me to finally put an end to this. Apparently, they wanted to strike a deal with me and said that if I gave them the money that my ex-in-laws promised them, they would take my side this time in court and make sure that I got custody of my son. I was about to suggest this myself, but honestly, it was not surprising that they did it. My family had always been very materialistic, and even more so now that my dad's business had failed and they were back to working jobs for other people. Obviously, they would want money more than ever now because my dad wanted to retire, but he didn't even have enough money put aside since he had put all his money into the business and it went on to fail. They said that they could concoct some story about how they had been pressured and coerced into testifying against me so they couldn't be charged with perjury while under oath, but little did they know that I didn't actually need help anymore. I had been recording everything that they had said right from the second I stepped foot into the house because I knew that there was something messed up going on, and I didn't want to take any risks, so I had everything on record. Anyway, but nevertheless, I told my family to send me the screenshots if they had any to prove that they had been used and lied to, and then I told them that I would help them out and then left. I had already seen my son, and I had more than enough proof to file for custody again, so that's what I did the next day with my lawyer, and this time I was prepared. The custody case is still ongoing, but one thing is for sure. I'll be able to prove that none of the things that James had accused me of had been true, and my family had been lying about everything all along. I've already played the recording, and that has swayed things in my favor considerably. James and his lawyer are literally scrambling for evidence in their favor, and I am taking it all in and enjoying the show because this is what they had put me through last time, and now I get to do it to them. It's karma at its finest, and I couldn't be happier about it. The only thing that's been less than ideal. They have been claiming that I have also used them just like James did, and that I had no right to record them without their consent and use it against them. But in my state, it's completely okay and admissible in court, so I didn't understand what they were referring to until they told me that I had betrayed their trust by recording them. These are bold words from people who betrayed my trust first by taking my ex-husband's side in the custody case. They believed that what I did was wrong because what they had done was out of necessity. They needed the money, but I didn't need to screw them over and put them at risk of perjury because they had already agreed to help me out and testify against James and his family, so I didn't have to go behind their back. They've been texting me relentlessly, and it's getting harder for me to ignore, so I'm going to be ignoring them for going behind my family's back and putting them at risk of being charged with perjury. Update 1. Hello everyone, the custody case is still ongoing, and James and his lawyer are trying their very hardest to prove that they have been telling the truth because of course they might be facing charges and it's a felony so they might get jail time. But that's really not my concern right now, and it shouldn't have been at any point. I don't even know why I was getting worried about my parents when they clearly didn't worry about me when it was my turn, so it's really just tit for tat right now. The comments section opened my eyes to how extremely entitled my parents were, but anyway, I have cut ties with them. All of them can go where they want to. I want my son to be all right and with me. I have waited long enough for this, and I'm not going to let my family and their victimization of themselves. If they can sell me out for money, I don't think it's necessary for me to show any loyalty towards them. I'm done now. Update 2. So the good news is that I finally got custody of my son. I don't think I've ever felt so happy in my entire life. The other good news is that my in-laws, James, and my family were charged with perjury, and yes, they might go to jail for it. I bet they're regretting everything now, but I don't care about any of it because I got what I wanted. I got my son back, and that's all I had ever asked for. From what I know, James is still trying to fight it and stay out of jail, but I don't think it's going to work. I've already filed for a restraining order against all of them because I've been receiving very threatening text messages, and I am 100% sure that it has to be from these people because nobody else would want to harm me unless it's them. Things have been really busy and hectic for the past couple of weeks, but I'm learning to slow down now. I desperately want to spend more time with my son, so I have decided that I'm going to cut my work hours shorter. I've also thought about selling the house and moving to a smaller apartment so I can save more money. I still have a lot of work to do. Rebuilding my relationship with my son is not going to be an easy task because even though he is happy to be with me, he still asks about his dad and his grandparents, and I don't know what to tell him. He has told me a couple of things about them, like how he had been living with his grandparents for the most part, and his dad and my in-laws were only there for him for part of the day. Whenever I asked him about how it was living with his grandparents, he makes a face and says that it was not that great because everyone would constantly be fighting, and I can totally see that. It sounds like they really gave him a rough time just because they didn't want to take up his responsibility. I can't imagine why they would treat a child like that, but I couldn't put it past these people. They are most definitely capable of even making a little boy feel bad about himself. But anyway, I don't have to worry about that because now he is with me. Update 3. Hi everyone. So I can't believe I'm back here after almost 5 years. It feels kind of unreal how different my life is right now. 5 years is a really long time and so much has changed, the first being how much older my son is. We have a beautiful relationship right now, and after countless therapy sessions, he and I have finally become the mother and son that we should have been right from the beginning. He is growing up to be a wonderful man, and I'm sure that he will turn out to be nothing like his father because I just know it in my heart. He is 9 years old right now and already a perfect gentleman. I'm raising him on my own, and I have full custody because James gave up and moved to Europe after he was out of jail. I can't say that I'm surprised. He went away with his coworker who he had been cheating on me with, and now they are married. I guess he just replaced his actual biological son with the other kid. It's horrifying, but that's the kind of person that he is. As for my parents and my brother, they were out of jail after 6 months for good behavior. We have not kept in touch, and they did not try to reach out to me after they were out, which I am grateful for because I don't think I would have had anything to say to them anyway. I don't have any news about my in-laws. I haven't heard about them or from them for years, and it's for the best. I think I'm living a life now. I have a stable job and a steady income, by God's grace. I'm still working at the company that I started out with, my friend's business, and it's doing pretty great. So life turned out well for me and my son, and it's more than what I could have asked for. I'm truly grateful for everything. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I abandoned my family because they deserved it. I abandoned my wife and my 13-year-old daughter a week after I discovered my wife's affair. It's now almost 6 months since that day I discovered her affair by chance. Our marriage had plenty of intimacy and was in good shape. I came home late from work and there was a safety training seminar I had to attend. My wife, Eve, was sleeping on the sofa and a message with some emojis popped up on her phone. Emojis like I would use when I message her. I snooped and I found out what had been going on for at least 5 months. I knew the affair partner, Adam. He was a work colleague of hers. He was married and had 3 children. While reading the messages, something just snapped in my head. It fundamentally changed me. Over the course of reading their messages, I went from loving Eve more than anything to hating her to just going blank. Not just about her, but everything. Totally numb. I took pictures of the messages and went to bed. Eve was mad the next day that I went to bed without waking her up. She complained about neck pain from sleeping on the couch all night. I wasn't really listening. I just remember thinking how everything was muffled. During breakfast, I didn't say a single word. My wife and daughter chatted away. They didn't seem to notice anything different about me or even acknowledge me, but I definitely didn't feel like myself. I went through all the daily motions. I went to work, did all the normal stuff. The only difference is I sort of stopped talking. Sadly, I realized that nobody seemed to even notice. It's like I wasn't even there. I started to understand that even my daughter didn't really love me. I was in the house with them, but unless they wanted something from me, they didn't really interact. I would get these pangs of pain. They would come and go. Sometimes they would overwhelm me completely. I walked around like this for 5 days before you asked me if something was wrong during dinner. I maybe uttered 3 words in total to her and my daughter in that period. I didn't even answer her question. I just made a confused face, then continued eating. She seemed okay with that. The next day, I didn't go to work. I didn't really have a plan. I put it in my car and walked around the neighborhood for a while. I ended up at the kitchen table waiting for the wife to come home. She came home with a few bags of groceries. She immediately started talking about her day while unpacking. I just sat at the kitchen table in pain. She didn't even look at me apart from one glance as she entered the kitchen. Daughter popped in and did the same. Their backs were turned to me and they talked about some trivial crap on sale. I have never felt so rejected, unappreciated, so alone. I felt totally invisible, like I wasn't there or that I wasn't worth acknowledging. I was thinking back on our lives and all I could see was that they didn't care about me at all. They probably never did. I was an accessory to their life. I was hit with a wave of pain. I cried. Still, they didn't notice, so I got angry, very angry. I had a glass of water in front of me. I stood up and threw it hard at the tiles over the sink. It just exploded. Glass shards rained over everything. They froze, unsure what to do when they saw my contorted, tear-soaked face. It was uncomfortably quiet for a long while before I spoke. Eve, I know all about your cheating with Adam. My daughter looked at Eve. What? Is that true, Mom? He started to try to explain. She briefly glanced at me and said, sorry, I can explain. Then she turned back to her daughter and they started arguing again. It was like I was invisible or something. After a few minutes watching their increasingly heated argument, I just walked out and got in my car. I looked at them again through the window, still arguing in the kitchen. They didn't even notice I had left. I sat there for a few more minutes before I gave up and just drove off. It took maybe 15 minutes before you tried to call me, then call after call after call, then a flood of texts from both of them. I just ignored it and eventually turned the phone off. The next day, I took half of our money out and called my boss. I told him I didn't know when I would be back. He told me if I didn't show up, I was fired. I just told him okay and hung up. I just didn't care. I went to Adam's house. His wife opened. I gave her a copy of the messages and told her what Adam and my wife had been up to. I left her crying on the stairs. At the end of the day, I ended up in a cheap hotel at the edge of town. The next few days were kind of a blur. Eve's older brother is a cop named Bob. Bob showed up on the fourth day. I don't know how he found me. He tried to interrogate me, but I didn't say anything. When I didn't engage, he told me I was under arrest and put me in cuffs. However, he didn't take me to the station like I expected. He took me home instead. Bob dragged me into the living room where my wife and daughter immediately started berating me. Still, I said nothing. I just listened in amazement while they told me how terrible this was for them. What a terrible a-hole I was for making them worry. It went on for a while. In the end, he screamed at me, "Say something." I stared at her for a while before calling me saying, "I have nothing to say to you." Bob freaked out and slammed me against the wall, screaming at me to not talk to his sister that way. I got a lot of satisfaction out of Bob's violent reaction. I don't know why it made me so happy. I was laughing. Bob's wife left him 4 months earlier. I smiled at Bob. "You're pathetic, Bob. Did you hurt your wife? Bob, is that why she left you?" Bob hurt me hard. I went down. Wife and daughter started screaming their heads off as I started to get up. I just laughed even harder. I just couldn't help myself. I am still in handcuffs, laughing. I said, "F you, Bob." He knocked me out cold this time. I woke up in the hospital. I puked all over the floor the second I opened my eyes, so I knew I had a concussion. Eve, Bob, and my daughter were there. They were talking to me. I was too confused to make it out. A nurse appeared and asked them to leave. She got me a pan to puke in and called someone to clean while she was taking my pulse. I told her that my family put me here and that they were not to come anywhere near me. If they came back into the room, I would leave. I would just run away. She argued, kind of sternly, that running or even getting up was a really bad idea for me, but she would talk to security. I didn't see them again in the hospital. It was bliss. I decided to disappear, to turn into a ghost. I wanted nothing to do with these people ever again. I made a letter to each of them. I warned Bob that if he ever bothered me again, I would report him. I told my daughter that he had betrayed me and that she would be without a father from now on too. If I made a longer letter, I tried to be as practical as possible. I told her to sell the house, that I won't be paying the mortgage or utilities anymore. I told her reconciliation or even contact was impossible, especially after she had sent her brother to drag me back and hurt me senseless in front of them. I explained that I won't do anything for her ever again, so if she wants a divorce, she will have to arrange it. I told her I will disappear and I don't want to be found. I ended it with her. If she interferes with my life again, I will simply end myself. I really regret giving her that last sentence. It's like I let her steal a little bit more of me, like I let her give me a little more pain. In the hospital, I made a plan on how I could disappear. It gave the hospital some fresh clothes that they forwarded to me. Then one evening, I just went out the rear fire escape. I triggered some kind of alarm. I was panicking a bit, but thankfully no one stopped me. I got back to the hotel to pick up my car. I traded it with a small RV and set off. I got a new phone. The only person I called was my father. I told him everything and told him if he gave my new number to anyone, I would become totally unreachable forever. He could call me if he needed to reach me, if I needed to sign something. Other than that, I wanted to be left alone for the first few months. I grieved the loss of my old life, but I came to realize that I grieved the loss of a fantasy, a memory that only existed in my head, the loving wife and daughter, the family friends. It was all just an illusion in my head. These people never really cared for me. Over time, I started to rebuild a sort of life, only this time I was a total ghost. I rent a safety deposit box to keep valuables in cash. I do odd jobs for money. I hunt and fish and scavenge. My money consumption is insignificant, so my cash reserves are actually growing. I don't pay taxes. I don't have a bank account. When people ask my name, I answer, people call me Fred. I go out of my way to not contribute to society or anything else for that matter. All in all, my life is getting better. At least now, no one is using me for nothing but their own benefit while pretending they care about me. I don't know what happened to my wife and daughter, my old friends, or the rest of the family. I don't know if I'm divorced now or if I owe child support. I don't know what happened to the house. I don't really care. My father has tried to give me information a few times, but I shut that down hard. He is the only one I speak to occasionally for my old life. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My sister-in-law stole the money which I had saved to buy a laptop. My brother sided with her, so I left them. A year later, I got a call from a hospital. I, 32F, have been living with my brother, 35M, and his wife, 34F, for the past 3 years. It all started when I lost my job during the economic downturn. I was working as a marketing coordinator for a small startup that unfortunately couldn't weather the financial storm. The company went under, and suddenly I found myself unemployed and struggling to make ends meet in the expensive city I called home. First, I tried to make it work. I dipped into my savings, picked up odd jobs, and even tried my hand at freelancing. But as the months wore on and my bank account dwindled, it became clear that I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. That's when my brother stepped in. My brother, let's call him Mark, has always been my rock growing up. He was the one who protected me from schoolyard bullies, helped me with my homework, and gave me advice about life. When our parents passed away in a car accident 10 years ago, Mark became more than just a brother. He became my only family. So when Mark offered me a place to stay until I got back on my feet, I was incredibly grateful. He and his wife, Sarah, had a spare room in their house, and they insisted it was no trouble. First, everything was great. It felt like old times with Mark and I staying up late talking and laughing like we used to. Sarah seemed okay with the arrangement initially. She and I had never been particularly close, but we were always cordial. I remember when Mark first introduced us to her 7 years ago. She was charming and vivacious, and I was happy to see my brother so in love. But there was always something about her that made me slightly uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on it then, and I brushed it off as just being protective of my brother. Things started to change about 6 months into my stay. Sarah began making snide comments about how long I was planning to stay. At first, they were subtle. A raised eyebrow here, a sigh there, but gradually they became more overt. She'd say things like, "Don't you think it's time you found your own place?" Or, "I'm sure someone with your skills could find a job if you really tried." I tried to brush it off, thinking she was just having a hard time adjusting to having a long-term guest. I redoubled my job search efforts and tried to contribute more around the house, doing extra chores and cooking meals to show my appreciation. But Sarah's behavior only worsened. She'd accidentally throw away my mail, claiming she thought it was junk. Once, I missed an important interview because the invitation got lost in the trash. She'd use my toiletries and never replace them, leaving me without shampoo or toothpaste more times than I can count. The incident that really opened my eyes to how bad things had gotten was when Sarah mistakenly donated a box of my clothes to charity. It wasn't just any clothes. It was a box containing some of my most treasured possessions, including the dress I wore to my college graduation and a sweater that had belonged to our mother. When I confronted her about it, she played innocent and said she thought they were old clothes meant for donation. But the look in her eyes told me she knew exactly what she was doing. I tried talking to Mark about it, but he always defended Sarah. He'd say things like, "That's just how she is," or "I'm sure she didn't mean it." It was frustrating, but I didn't want to cause trouble, so I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to risk losing the only family I had left. As time went on, I noticed other troubling behaviors from Sarah. She seemed to be isolating Mark from his friends and even some of his family members. I remember one Thanksgiving when she threw a fit because Mark wanted to spend the holiday with our elderly aunt instead of her family. She gave him the silent treatment for days after that. Despite my concerns, I kept quiet because Mark seemed happy. When they got married 5 years ago, I hoped Sarah would mellow out, but if anything, she became worse. She started controlling their finances, giving Mark an allowance despite him being the primary earner. She would check his phone regularly and accuse him of cheating if he so much as spoke to a female coworker. Things came to a head last week. I had been saving up for months to buy a new laptop for my freelance work. I kept the cash in an envelope in my dresser drawer. One day, I came home to find the envelope missing. When I asked Sarah about it, she claimed she hadn't seen it. But then I saw a brand new designer purse on the coffee table, something she had been eyeing for months but said she couldn't afford. I confronted her again, this time more forcefully. She broke down and admitted she had taken the money, saying she thought I owed it to them for letting me stay so long. I was furious and hurt. When Mark came home, I told him everything. To my shock and disappointment, he sided with Sarah. He said I should have been more careful with my money and that I was being ungrateful for all they had done for me. That was the last straw. I packed my bags that night and left. I'm currently staying at a friend's place while I figure out my next move. I can't believe my own brother would choose his lying, thieving wife over me. I feel lost and betrayed. Mark is the only family I have left, and I never thought our relationship would come to this. Part of me wants to forgive and forget, but another part feels like I can never trust them again. To give some more context, Sarah has always been a bit of a handful. When she and Mark first started dating, I had my reservations. She seemed overly possessive and would often try to isolate Mark from his friends and family. I remember one time when Mark and I had planned a weekend camping trip, something we'd done every year since we were kids. The night before we were supposed to leave, Sarah suddenly came down with a mysterious illness that required Mark to stay home and take care of her. Miraculously, she recovered as soon as the weekend was over. Despite my concerns, I kept quiet because Mark seemed happy. I told myself that maybe Sarah just needed time to adjust to being part of our family. After all, she had a difficult childhood herself. Apparently, her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother remarried multiple times, which left Sarah with trust issues. Mark would often use this as an excuse for her behavior, saying she just needed extra reassurance because of her past. I understand that everyone has their baggage, but I don't think that excuses Sarah's behavior. She's been manipulating and gaslighting Mark for years, and now she's turned her tactics on me. I feel like I'm losing my brother to this toxic relationship, and I don't know what to do. Part of me feels guilty for leaving. What if Sarah escalates her behavior now that I'm not there to act as a buffer? But another part of me is relieved to be out of that toxic environment. I just wish Mark could see Sarah for who she really is. I'm torn between cutting all ties and trying to maintain some sort of relationship with my brother. He's all the family I have left, but I can't stand by and watch him be manipulated like this anymore. Any advice on how to move forward would be appreciated. Update 1. It's been 6 months since I moved out of Mark and Sarah's house, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give an update on the situation and share some developments. After I left, I stayed with my friend for about a month before finding a small studio apartment. It's not much, but it's mine, and I don't have to worry about anyone stealing from me or messing with my stuff. I've been throwing myself into my freelance work, and thankfully business has been good. I've managed to land a few regular clients, which has provided some much-needed stability. For the first couple of months, I didn't hear anything from Mark or Sarah. I was hurt but also relieved not to have to deal with the drama. Then, about 3 months ago, Mark started reaching out. At first, it was just casual texts asking how I was doing. I responded politely but kept things brief. I wasn't ready to let my guard down yet. As time went on, his messages became more frequent and seemed more desperate. He would ask if we could meet up for coffee or lunch, but I always found an excuse to decline. Part of me wanted to see him to try and mend our relationship, but another part was still too hurt and angry. About a month ago, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. It was a small local place that we used to go to together when we were younger. Seeing him there, in a place filled with so many memories, caught me off guard. It was awkward at first, but we ended up talking for a while in the parking lot. Mark looked tired and stressed. Nothing like the confident, happy brother I remembered. He told me that things at home weren't great. Sarah had become even more controlling since I left. She had convinced him to quit his job because she didn't like him working with female colleagues. Now he was working from home, doing some online gig that Sarah had found for him. I was shocked to hear this. Mark had loved his job at the architectural firm. He had been there for over a decade and had been on track for a partnership. It was his dream job, something he had worked towards since college. I couldn't believe he had given it up. As we were talking, Sarah called him. I could hear her yelling through the phone, demanding to know where he was and who he was talking to. Mark looked panicked and quickly ended our conversation, promising to call me later. He never did. This encounter left me feeling even more conflicted. On one hand, I was still hurt and angry about how Mark had treated me. On the other hand, I was worried about him. It was clear that Sarah's behavior had escalated, and I feared for my brother's well-being. I decided to reach out to some of our mutual friends to see if they knew more about the situation. What I learned was disturbing. Apparently, Sarah had systematically cut off almost all of Mark's friends. She had convinced him that they were bad influences or that they were trying to come between them. One friend, Tom, who had been Mark's best friend since college, told me a particularly troubling story. He said that he had noticed bruises on Mark's arms a few months ago and had confronted him about it. Mark had brushed it off, claiming he had accidentally hurt himself while doing some home repairs. Tom didn't buy it and tried to talk to Mark about domestic abuse, but Mark shut him down and hasn't spoken to him since. Hearing all this made me realize that the situation was far worse than I had imagined. Mark wasn't just in a relationship, he was in an abusive one. I felt guilty for not seeing the signs earlier and for leaving him alone with Sarah. I started thinking back to all the little things I had noticed over the years but had dismissed. The way Mark would flinch sometimes when Sarah raised her voice, the times he would cancel plans at the last minute with vague excuses, the gradual changes in his personality, how he became less outgoing, less confident, more anxious. I remembered one incident from about 2 years ago that now seemed much more sinister in light of what I knew. Mark and I had planned to go to a concert together. It was a band we both loved, and we had been excited about it for months. On the day of the concert, Mark called to cancel, saying he wasn't feeling well. When I saw him a few days later, he had a cut on his lip. He claimed he had fallen, but now I wonder if there was more to the story. I'm torn about what to do now. Part of me wants to rush in and try to save Mark, but I know that could backfire. He's still defending Sarah and might not be ready to accept help. Plus, I'm worried that if I push too hard, Sarah might completely isolate him, and I'll lose any chance of helping. For now, I've decided to keep the lines of communication open. I've started responding more to Mark's messages and have even suggested meeting up again. He hasn't taken me up on the offer yet, but I'm hoping he will when he's ready. I'm also looking into resources for people with loved ones in abusive relationships. I want to be prepared to help Mark when he's ready to accept it. I've been reading books on the subject and even attended a support group for family members of abuse victims. It's been eye-opening and heartbreaking to hear stories similar to Mark's. This whole situation has been a roller coaster of emotions. I'm still hurt by what happened, but now I'm more worried than angry. I just want my brother to be safe and happy. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm committed to being there for him, even if it's from a distance for now. I keep thinking about our parents and what they would say if they could see us now. They always taught us to look out for each other, and I feel like I failed in that, but I'm determined to make it right somehow. Mark is the only family I have left, and I'm not giving up on him. Update 2. It's been a year since my original post, and I have another update to share. A lot has changed, and I'm still processing everything that's happened. About 2 months ago, I got a call from Mark in the middle of the night. It was around 2 a.m., and I was sound asleep when my phone started ringing. At first, I thought it might be a work emergency. I had recently taken on a client in a different time zone, but when I saw it was Mark, my heart started racing. We hadn't spoken on the phone in months, and a middle-of-the-night call could only mean trouble. When I answered, Mark's voice was shaky and quiet. He told me he was at the hospital. Apparently, Sarah had gotten violent during an argument, and he had finally called the police. She was arrested, and he was getting checked out for his injuries. I rushed to the hospital, not sure what to expect. The drive there was a blur. I remember running every red light and praying I wouldn't get pulled over. When I arrived and saw Mark, my heart broke. He had a black eye, bruises on his arms, and a defeated look that I had never seen before. As soon as he saw me, he broke down crying and apologized for everything. Over the next few days, the whole story came out. The abuse had been going on for years, starting with emotional manipulation and escalating to physical violence. Sarah had isolated him from friends and family, controlled all their finances, and convinced him that he was worthless without her. Mark admitted that he had known for a long time that something was wrong, but he had been too ashamed and scared to ask for help. He said he realized how bad things were when Sarah stole my money, but he was too deep in the fog to stand up to her then. The incident that finally pushed him to call the police was when Sarah threatened to hurt herself if he tried to leave. He realized then that the situation was dangerous, not just for him but potentially for her too. As Mark shared more details about his life with Sarah, I felt a mix of horror, sadness, and guilt. He told me about how Sarah would constantly belittle him, telling him he was stupid and worthless. She would fly into rages over small things, like him leaving a dish in the sink or talking to a female cashier at the grocery store. He described incidents where she would throw things at him, push him, or slap him. The physical abuse had started small, a shove here, a slap there, but had escalated over time. The night he called the police, Sarah had thrown a heavy vase at his head, narrowly missing him and shattering against the wall. Mark also revealed that Sarah had been manipulating their finances for years. She had maxed out credit cards in his name, taken out loans he didn't know about, and even remortgaged their house without his knowledge. He was now deeply in debt and wasn't sure how he was going to recover financially. Since that night, Mark has been staying with me. He filed for divorce and got a restraining order against Sarah. It hasn't been easy. There are days when he seems like his old self, laughing and joking like we used to, but there are other days when he's consumed by guilt and self-doubt. He often questions whether he did the right thing by leaving, wondering if he could have done more to make the relationship work. Mark is in therapy now and slowly starting to rebuild his life. He's reconnected with some old friends and is even considering going back to his old job at the architectural firm. His former boss was understanding about the situation and said they'd be happy to have him back when he's ready. As for me, I'm still processing my own feelings about everything. I'm relieved that Mark is safe and out of that toxic relationship. I'm angry at Sarah for what she did, but also at myself for not seeing the signs of abuse earlier. Most of all, I'm sad that we lost so much time and that Mark had to go through such a traumatic experience. Mark and I have had many long conversations over the past 2 months. He's apologized multiple times for how he treated me and for not believing me about Sarah. I've forgiven him, understanding now that he was a victim of abuse and wasn't fully in control of his actions. We're slowly rebuilding our relationship. It's not always easy. There's still hurt and mistrust to work through, but we're both committed to healing and moving forward together. We've started doing some of the things we used to enjoy together, like watching old movies or going for hikes. Feels good to reconnect with my brother again. One particularly emotional moment came when we were going through some old family photos. We found a picture of us with our parents from the last vacation we took together before they died. Mark broke down crying, saying he felt like he had let them down by letting things get so bad with Sarah. I reminded him that our parents would be proud of him for having the courage to leave an abusive situation and seek help. As for Sarah, she's facing legal consequences for her actions. She was charged with domestic violence and is currently awaiting trial. Mark is cooperating with the authorities, but he's also struggling with conflicting emotions about the whole situation. There are moments when he feels angry and wants justice, and others when he feels guilty for abandoning her. His therapist says this is normal for abuse survivors, but it's still hard to watch him go through it. The divorce proceedings have been complicated due to the financial mess Sarah created. Mark discovered that she had been gambling away a lot of their money, which explained some of the mysterious debts. He's working with a financial advisor and a lawyer to try and untangle everything, but it's going to be a long process. Despite all the challenges, I'm starting to see glimpses of the old Mark coming back. He's laughing more, standing up straighter, and even talking about future plans. Last week, he mentioned that he might want to go back to school to get his master's degree. Something he had always wanted to do, but Sarah had discouraged. For now, we're taking it one day at a time. Mark is focusing on his therapy and starting to reconnect with old friends. I'm doing my best to support him while also taking care of my own mental health. It's a balancing act, but we're managing. This whole experience has been a harsh reminder that abuse can happen to anyone, regardless of gender or background. It's also shown me the importance of family and the strength that can come from supporting each other through difficult times. I'm not sure what the future holds for us, but I'm hopeful. Mark is slowly healing, and our relationship is growing stronger. We're relearning how to be a family again, just the two of us. It's different from what we had before, but in some ways, it feels more real and solid than ever. There are still tough days ahead. I'm sure the legal proceedings with Sarah are ongoing, and Mark still has a lot of healing to do. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're on the right path. We're facing things together, just like our parents taught us to do. As I write this update, Mark is in the other room on the phone with his therapist. I can hear him laughing at something, and it makes me smile. It's a small thing, but it gives me hope. We've been through a lot, but we're survivors, and together, I believe we can get through anything. Now on to the next story. Story 4. So, was I being a jerk for freaking out on my in-laws after they snooped through my stuff? I'm super excited because I just got engaged, which is pretty awesome, right? Part of getting ready for the big day means spending time with our families, talking about wedding plans, and just getting to know each other better. We planned a little trip to visit both sides of the family, starting with mine and then moving on to my fiancé's. Now, there's something important you should know about me. I deal with this annoying health issue that causes me a lot of pain pretty much all the time. To help manage the pain and make life a bit more bearable, I take several kinds of medicine. A couple of side effects of these meds are that they make me not feel hungry and sometimes make me feel like I'm going to throw up. It's not fun, but it's something I've learned to live with. I haven't told my fiancé's parents about this because it's kind of personal, and I wasn't sure how they'd react. A few nights into our visit, I overheard my future mother-in-law complaining to someone about how I hardly eat anything they cook. She seemed to think I was just being picky or that I thought I was too good for their food. I decided not to say anything about it at the time because I didn't want to start any drama. The next day, my fiancé decided to take me on a tour of his hometown, showing me all the places that were special to him growing up. It was really nice, but by the end of the day, I was exhausted. Just as we were getting back to his parents' house, he remembered he wanted to pick up some beer, but since we were already almost home and I was feeling really tired, he dropped me off and went back out. When I walked into the living room, I found his parents waiting for me, and it was clear they were not happy. My future mother-in-law looked especially upset and accused me of trying to sneak drugs into their house. I was taken aback and just wanted to sit down because my legs were aching, but she was having none of it. She insisted I stand while she lectured me about bringing disgusting stuff into their home. I tried to reach for my phone, maybe to call my fiancé or just to have something in my hand, but she snapped at me to keep my hands at my side. She went on a rant about how they don't allow garbage like that in their house, regardless of whether it's legal or not. Then, she pulled out this package wrapped in plastic, and as soon as I saw it, I realized what was going on. She claimed her husband had tried a bit of it and had gotten sick. So that's the situation. I ended up getting really upset and freaking out on them for going through my things. So, I'm standing there totally upset because what my future mother-in-law is waving around actually came from the very bottom of my suitcase. And then she starts making a big deal about how many pills I take. Seriously, the only way she'd know about that is if she had been snooping through my purse. Stuff that's not cool, right? She goes on to say that her son, my fiancé, doesn't deserve to be with someone who uses drugs. She then grabs my package and shows it to my future father-in-law. He apparently tried eating some of it and ended up throwing up. Can you believe that? All this drama unfolds, and about 10 minutes later, my fiancé comes back. His mom immediately starts grilling him, asking if he's aware of all the medication I'm on, and accusing me of bringing marijuana into their house. My fiancé is confused and can't seem to get a straight answer from them about how they even found out about my meds. Then, he looks at the package and just lets out this sigh. He's like, "Mom, this is soap." And yes, it's actually soap. Specifically African black soap. It even says so right on the package. To prove his point, he breaks off a piece, goes to the kitchen, and starts washing his hands with it, showing them how it lathers up just like any soap should. But my future mother-in-law isn't having it. She argues back, saying she's never seen soap like that before, and still making a fuss about all the medication I take. They try to justify snooping through my stuff by saying they're just looking out for their son and that since it's their house, they think they have the right to go through anyone's belongings. That was the last straw for me. I lost it. I started yelling and swearing a lot because I was just so done with everything. I was exhausted and frustrated. I can't even remember everything I said, but I know my throat was sore from all the yelling. At one point, my future father-in-law tries to give me back the soap, and I was so angry that I kind of threw it at him. I told him I didn't want his germs. Yeah, I know that was a pretty harsh thing to say. Now, we're staying in a hotel and not talking to his parents. I'm feeling really bad about the whole thing. I really wanted to have a good relationship with my in-laws, and until now, we were doing okay. But after this mess, I feel like I've really screwed things up. So I'm turning to you, Reddit. I need to hear it straight from you. Was I being a jerk in this situation? Additional information from OP's comments. So, there I was, completely baffled and trying to piece together why on earth someone would dig through my stuff. Seriously, what was going through their heads? Did they think they were on some sort of treasure hunt in my luggage? Maybe they were hoping to find something sketchy, or perhaps they were just bored and looking for a thrill. It's like they wanted to stir up some drama or maybe catch a buzz off whatever they found, considering how stressful family stuff can be. Then, everything just went sideways when they found my soap and actually got sick from it. I mean, what? I have so many questions spinning in my head, and honestly, I'm just fed up with the whole situation. Despite all this craziness, deep down, I really do want to get on good terms with my in-laws. I don't want to keep bringing up this mess or hold any grudges, but here's the thing. I'm not even sure what caught there first in my luggage. The meds are in the soap. The soap was all wrapped up in plastic and tucked into a brown paper bag, just like how the person I buy it from always packages it. It makes me wonder if it had looked like a brownie or something. Would they have just munched on it without a second thought? The whole thing is just so confusing to me. I mean, there were clear bite marks on the soap, but it doesn't even smell like something you'd eat. Sure, it kind of looks like a brownie, especially in the picture I found on the website where I buy it. And yeah, looking at that photo, I can see how someone might mistake it for a brownie, but still, I'm pretty sure his mom is never going to say sorry for the mix-up. It's like she's made of Teflon. Nothing ever sticks to her, and she never admits she's wrong. And here we are, a day later, and we haven't spoken a word to them. The biggest issue for me right now is that I can't, for the life of me, remember exactly what I said during the whole blow-up. When I get really mad, my memory just goes blank. That's why I always try to stay chill and not let things bug me too much. I think I remember saying some choice words to a few of his relatives, including a not-so-nice farewell. Probably not my finest moment, but I was just so done. All I can really recall is how hoarse my voice was from all the shouting. Once I had calmed down a bit, we quickly packed up our things from the room we were staying in and decided to leave. After the whole soap incident and the argument with my fiancé's parents, we just left their place. We didn't say goodbye or anything. We just up and left. My fiancé, he's been pretty quiet since then, but it's obvious he's feeling really stressed and upset about everything that went down. He did manage to say sorry to me, which meant a lot. I've got to admit, I'm feeling pretty bad about the whole thing too. I know I let my temper get the best of me, said some things I probably shouldn't have, and yeah, throwing the soap at my future father-in-law, that was definitely a mistake. Now, we're trying to figure out what to do next. Should we try to make amends and visit them again, or should we just keep our distance, enjoy the rest of our time in town, and then head home when it's time for our flight? Talking about my meds. Every single one of them was prescribed by a doctor. Honestly, I don't even like taking them. They're for my chronic pain, which is something really personal and tough to deal with. Opening up about this pain to my fiancé's family feels incredibly daunting. It's not something I talk about lightly. In fact, it took me over 10 years to even tell my own family about what I was going through. When I was younger, they just thought I was being lazy. But the truth was, I was in a lot of pain pretty much all the time. There's another layer to this whole situation that I've been hesitant to talk about, but it feels important to mention now. I'm black, and my fiancé is white. I really hoped that this wouldn't become an issue, but after everything that's happened, I can't shake the feeling that it might be playing a role in the tension. It's heartbreaking to think about, especially since I've been trying so hard to maintain a good relationship with his family. Whenever we travel, I always make sure to send them souvenirs and postcards, doing my best to show them that I care and I'm thinking about them. I once asked my fiancé what his parents thought about our interracial relationship. He kind of shrugged it off, implying that if they had any issues with it, they just have to get over it. But then there was this moment when I first met them, and his mom kept bringing up his ex-fiancée, the one who cheated on him, and kept calling her such a nice girl. This happened right after she met me for the first time. I've been trying not to dwell on it too much, but after the recent events, it's been on my mind a lot more. It's tough not to wonder if there's more going on beneath the surface, especially considering how quickly things escalated over something as simple as a misunderstanding about a bar of soap. Update 1. Hey everyone, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for all the support and kind messages you've sent my way. It really means a lot, especially when I've been feeling super unsure about whether I acted right or if I was being fair. But with all your advice and those uplifting private messages cheering me on, I'm starting to feel a bit better. Well, somewhat better, to be honest. We got back home about 3 days ago, and the trip really took it out of me, so I've been mostly just resting up. I had a heart-to-heart with my fiancé too. I said sorry to him because I was the one who really pushed for us to visit his folks, even though he had a feeling it wouldn't end well. He was totally right, and I wish I had listened to him from the start. Now, before I dive into the latest news, I want to open up a bit about the pain I go through, since a lot of you were asking about it. This pain and I have been together since I was in my early teens. It's been a constant companion. Unfortunately, the whole situation got way worse about 5 years ago, and that's when I realized I needed to find better ways to manage it. That led to more visits to physical therapy and getting prescribed more medication. Looking ahead, I might need to start using a cane to help me get around in a few years. But for now, I'm holding up okay. It's really tough to talk about this stuff, though. When people see me out having fun or just living my life, they don't really get what I'm dealing with. I worry a lot about not being taken seriously. Talking about this pain is the worst. It feels like as soon as I try to explain that I'm dealing with constant pain, people might think I'm just making excuses. And then there's the whole thing where folks might start avoiding you because they think you'll bring down the mood or be a buzzkill at gatherings. I've had to leave so many parties and hangouts early because the pain got too bad. Thankfully, the medicine I'm on these days helps me get by. I can do most things, but I get worn out super fast. Just getting out of bed in the morning can feel like running a marathon. On the day my fiancé and I decided to go out, I was actually feeling pretty good, but I ended up walking way more than I should have. Going from walking around to sitting still in the car and then struggling to find a comfortable way to sit really didn't help. So, when his mom was really giving me a hard time, I didn't even try to defend myself or explain what was going on until my fiancé got back. And honestly, it's just so exhausting to have to explain why, at my age, I have to carry around a bunch of medication for pain. It feels like people are always judging me, especially when I meet new doctors. They often look at me and say stuff like, "You're too young to be on all these medications," and all I can do is just agree with them because arguing doesn't help. On top of all that, my health condition means that having kids isn't in the cards for us. That's a whole other thing to deal with. As for his parents, we haven't spoken to them since that whole mess. My fiancé tells me that his mom is the type who never admits she's wrong and won't apologize, and his dad just goes along with whatever she says. They've never really given us a clear reason why they felt they needed to go through my stuff or why on earth anyone would think it's okay to eat something they found in there. I'm pretty sure there's more going on behind the scenes, but I've decided to let my fiancé handle how we deal with his parents from here on out. We've mostly been trying to just ignore the whole situation and move past it, but it's like you can't really escape it. He's even been keeping me away from his grandparents on his dad's side because they have some pretty outdated views, and he's worried they might say something hurtful to me. I've come to terms with that reality. And then there's the whole thing with facing racism, which my fiancé didn't really know much about until he started dating me. We've had to deal with some pretty nasty comments from strangers when we're out together. I even had a black guy shout at me once, making a big deal about me being with a white guy. It's been tough dealing with all this negativity from the outside world. We were really hoping that, at least with our families, we'd find some kind of safe space where we could just be ourselves without having to worry about all that. My fiancé and I have come to a decision that if we're going to keep in touch with his parents after all this drama, we're only going to do it through writing letters or sending emails. It's pretty sad that things had to get to this point, but honestly, my fiancé knows his family way better than I do, and if I'm being completely open here, it kind of seems like he was almost waiting for the right moment or excuse to reduce how much we talk to them. This whole situation just gave him the perfect reason to do that. It feels like his parents were just searching for any possible reason to dislike me. Maybe it's because of my race, or maybe it's something else. I'm not totally sure, but for whatever reason, they thought it was a good idea to go snooping through my luggage. Ever since that happened, we haven't talked to them, and you know what? Life has been surprisingly peaceful. It's like this big burden has been lifted, and my fiancé doesn't feel that pressure to constantly check in with his parents anymore. Moreover, we've made the choice to set up our life in the United States instead of Canada, where his mom really wanted him to stay. The main reason is that there are just so many more opportunities for his career over here than where his parents live. Honestly, I'm totally fine if people on this online platform want to call me names. That seems to be how things go here, but I was really taken aback when some folks started calling me a drug addict or saying I'm a bad match for my fiancé just because I take certain medications. That's just not right, and it's pretty hurtful. However, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who sent kind words, advice, or just a bit of encouragement. It's been really heartwarming to see that kind of support, and it truly means a lot to both of us during this weird time. So, thank you to all of you who've been genuinely trying to help out. Update 2. The last time I shared my story, I was wrestling with whether I was the jerk for losing my cool with my in-laws after they rummaged through my luggage, mistaking my soap for drugs, and then having a go at me for my medication. I've got to say, the aftermath has been a whirlwind, and I'm here to spill all the tea. After the whole soap saga, my fiancé and I decided to cool off at a hotel, leaving the chaos of his parents' house behind. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and honestly, I was mentally and physically drained. Dealing with chronic pain is no joke, and the stress of the confrontation just made everything 1,000 times worse. Many of you were curious about my health, so here's the scoop. I've been battling this pain since my teens, and over the years, it's only gotten tougher. The medications help, but they're a double-edged sword. On one hand, they give me some semblance of normalcy, but on the other, they attract unwarranted judgment and a barrage of questions I'm not always ready to answer. My fiancé has been my rock through this, but the incident with his parents shook us both. We haven't spoken to them since the blow-up. Honestly, the silence has been blissful, but it's also a stark reminder of the rift that's formed. My fiancé hinted that his mom's inability to apologize and his dad's tendency to follow her lead meant we were unlikely to get any closure or understanding from them. It's a tough pill to swallow, knowing that we might never understand why they felt entitled to invade my privacy like that. The racial dynamics have added another layer of complexity to the whole situation. Being an interracial couple has its challenges, and though my fiancé has been supportive, it's clear that not everyone is as accepting. The incident with his parents might not have been overtly about race, but it's hard not to wonder if it played a part in their suspicions and actions. Since then, my fiancé and I have had a lot of heart-to-hearts about our future, especially regarding our families. He's been protective, trying to shield me from further hurt, even keeping me away from his grandparents who might not understand our relationship. It's sad, really, how love can be overshadowed by prejudice and misunderstanding. On a brighter note, we've been focusing on building our life together away from the negativity. The decision to live in the States was partly fueled by better job opportunities for my fiancé, but I'd be lying if I said the distance from his parents wasn't a relief too. It's given us space to breathe and plan our future without the constant pressure of pleasing everyone. Throughout all this, I've been blown away by the support from strangers online. Sure, there were some who judged me harshly, but the kindness and understanding from most have been a beacon of hope. It's comforting to know that even in our darkest moments, empathy and compassion can shine through. So, am I the jerk for how I reacted? Maybe to some, but I've come to realize that standing up for myself and setting boundaries is not only necessary but vital for my well-being. My fiancé and I are navigating these choppy waters together, and while the future is uncertain, one thing's for sure: we're in it together, for better or worse. And to everyone who's been following our story, thank you. Your encouragement means the world to us. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Ex-wife abandoned us 6 years ago. Now she showed up at my door crying and begging to be in our daughter's life again. I almost fell for it until her sister told me the cruel truth. So, a little background before I get into what has turned my life upside down. I, 32M, have been a single dad to my daughter, 16F, for the past 6 years. She is the light of my life, and I love her more than anything. I have been raising her by myself since her mother, my ex-wife, 31F, abandoned us when my little girl was 2 years old. She ran off with some guy, her current husband, 40M, and never looked back. She didn't even say goodbye to our daughter or me. She just left a note saying that she was sorry, but she had found her true love and she wanted to start a new life with him. She said she didn't want to be a mother or a wife anymore and that she never signed up for it. For context, my daughter was the result of an unplanned pregnancy. My wife and I were in a casual relationship but decided to get married for the sake of our daughter. However, I have never once regretted my daughter's birth, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I tried my best to be a good husband to my wife, but I guess it just didn't work out for her. In the note she left, she said she hoped we would be happy without her, and that I'm a great father and she knew I would take care of our daughter. The note also said that I could be as honest as I wanted with our daughter about what happened to her mommy once she was old enough to understand. Along with a note, there were divorce papers with her signatures already on them. She had asked for no alimony or any part of our marital assets and demanded no rights over our daughter. I was devastated and heartbroken. I couldn't believe that she would do something like that. We had been married for 10 years and we had been happy, or so I thought. We had met in college, and even though we were dating casually, it was sweet and fun. We had gotten married soon after we found out about the pregnancy, and I was overjoyed when my daughter was born. She was the most beautiful baby, and I thought we were both happy with how things turned out. We had a good life. We had a nice house, we had good jobs, and we had a loving family. We had everything anyone could ever want, or so I thought. Sure, we had problems like every couple does, but I did my best to do right by my family. After my wife left, I tried to contact her for months, but she had changed her number and blocked me on social media. I tried to find her, but she had moved to another state with her new lover. I tried to get some answers through my in-laws, but apparently, she had cut off all communication with them. So it was not just me and our daughter. I tried to get some closure, but she had left me with nothing but pain and confusion. The man she ran away with was someone she met at her gym. I found out who he was and tried to get in touch with someone from his family, but he lived alone, and his neighbors didn't know much about him. I somehow found out where he worked, but they told me that he quit a few weeks ago, so right around the time the two of them eloped. Eventually, I just decided to quit searching for nothing. It's not like I wanted her back in my life. I was angry and hurt, but I had to move on for the sake of our daughter. She was too young to understand what had happened, but she was smart enough to notice that her mommy was gone. She asked me where she was and when she would come back. She cried and begged me to bring her back. She said she missed her and loved her. I hope no parent ever has to go through the pain of seeing their child in that state. It broke my heart to see her like that. I didn't know what to tell her. I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't want to hurt her either. I decided to tell her the truth, but in a way that she could understand. I told her that mommy had gone away because she was unhappy and she wanted to be happy. I told her that mommy had found a new friend who made her happy and she wanted to be with him. I told her that mommy still loved her, but she couldn't be with her right now. I told her that daddy loved her very much and he would always be with her. I told her that we would be okay, just the two of us. She didn't seem to accept it at first. She still asked me about her mommy every day. She still cried and clung to me every night. School was very hard because she would see other kids with their moms, and you know how kids are. We live in a small town, and news of my wife leaving spread like wildfire. Some kids must have heard their parents talk about it, and my daughter had to hear all sorts of unnecessary comments. I was forced to move to a new neighborhood and put her in a new school to protect her. Took a long time, but she eventually started to heal. She gradually stopped asking me about her mommy. She slowly stopped crying and demanding to sleep in my bed with me. She began to accept that her mommy was gone and she wasn't coming back. It took a lot of effort, but I think she realized that she hadn't done anything wrong and it wasn't her fault. She understood that she wasn't abandoned and unloved. We never speak about her mom anymore either, and I've been feeling good about moving on from that chapter in our lives. Recently, she has even started telling me to get a girlfriend and makes jokes about how I'm eternally single. I am so proud of her and how strong she has been. I worked hard to give her a good home and a good education. I've always supported her interests and encouraged her talents. I was scared of her being disappointed again, so since her mom left 6 years ago, I have never dated or even thought of it. I miss companionship sometimes, but my daughter's needs are more important than mine, and I don't even plan on dating anyone till she's much older. We have a good life even though it's just the two of us. It never feels like we're missing anything. I have the support of my family too, and my daughter is absolutely adored and spoiled by her pops, grandma, and uncles. So here's where things went wrong. Last week, my ex's mom, 55F, let's call her Judith, showed up at my place unannounced and uninvited. She had never been a part of our lives since her daughter left us, even when I was still married. Judith could barely hide her contempt towards me because she thought that I wasn't good enough to be a part of their family because I didn't come from money and had a blue-collar job. She had never called or visited or sent a card or a gift on my daughter's birthdays. She had never shown any interest or concern for her granddaughter. She had never apologized, explained, or taken any responsibility for her daughter's actions. She had never done anything for us, but she had the audacity to show up at my door and act like I owed her some sort of huge debt. Honestly, I did not even recognize her when I saw her because it had been such a long time. She had to introduce herself for me to finally register who she was. I was extremely confused and asked her what she was doing at my house. She gave me a look like I said something ridiculous and told me that naturally she was here to meet her granddaughter and rescue her from the dump I had been raising her in. Before I could even say anything, she told me that she found out that my daughter is in a public school and that it was unacceptable for any child and her family to have such low standards for their education. She said that her daughter, meaning my ex-wife, had moved back into the family home with her new husband and that to complete their family and do what is best for everyone, she needed her granddaughter to come back to them. I was shocked and angry. For a second, I actually thought she was joking. What did she mean by a dump and all that garbage about a real family when the only family my daughter has known has been me and my family? Did this woman really think that she and her deadbeat daughter and some random guy would raise my daughter better than I can? I couldn't believe that she could say something like that. I mean, I know I'm not raising my daughter in luxury with an accountant's paycheck, but she is in no way deprived of anything. She goes to a good school, and I'm very attentive to her education. Sure, I would love to send her to the best schools in the country, but she is bright, and I know she will do well as long as she has the support of me and qualified teachers. I told my ex's mom that she had no right to see her and she had no right to take her. I told her that she was not her family and she didn't belong with her, and the only grandmother my daughter has is my mother and no one else. I threatened to call the police on her for trespassing. When she finally revealed her true colors, she said that if I refused to cooperate, she had enough money to hire the best lawyers in the country and would take me to court if I didn't agree with what she was saying. I scoffed at that and asked on what grounds, and she said that she would put up a false case of abuse against me and say that I forced my ex-wife to abandon our daughter and run away in order to save her own life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her allegations are, of course, completely false, but at that moment, I could see my whole life being destroyed. She threatened to pay off false witnesses and gather evidence that I was abusive to my ex-wife. I knew that she was capable of doing that. My ex-wife's family has been in law enforcement for generations. Both my late father-in-law and my ex's grandpa were police officers. I knew they had connections and could potentially ruin my life. I didn't know what to do. I begged her not to do this. I told her that her granddaughter was happy and healthy with me. I told her that we could talk to my daughter and ask her if she wanted to get to know her grandma. And if she did, I had no problem letting them see each other. But Judith wouldn't listen to anything I said. She told me that I had a week to get back to her or I would be hearing from her lawyer. I was still processing all this when she went ahead and did something even crazier than I could have expected. She offered me money to let her take my daughter. She said that if I didn't want all the unpleasant and expensive court procedures and lawyers, we could deal with this matter more simply. When I asked her what she meant, she offered me $500,000 and said that if I took the money and walked away, no one would get hurt and I would never have to work again in my life. When I got angry and refused her ridiculous offer, her tone completely changed. She said that she tried to be peaceful, but if I wanted to do things the difficult way, she was more than happy to accommodate me. I've been a wreck ever since. I didn't know where to ask for help. I thought of getting a lawyer, of course, but I wondered what good that would do if they were claiming to plant false evidence against me. I was scared about the future because I know what kind of a woman she is, and also courts are never kind to single fathers. I did not want to lose my daughter. She is everything I have, but I am not rich enough to hire the best lawyers for my case, so things are not looking good. I'm not sure what to do. My daughter obviously didn't know anything about any of this, and I could not decide if I should even tell her. I don't think she even remembers her grandmother. I know the thought of going to live with her is impossible, but the fact remains that she is a minor and can be taken away from me against both of our wishes. So, I came up with a plan that I knew was risky, but it was the only thing I thought I could do given the circumstances. After a week of living in total agony, I called my ex's mom saying that I would not be willing to fight a false case against me in the courts, and I have no interest in taking money from her because my daughter is not an object that I would simply exchange for money. I told her that my daughter had no interest in meeting her mother. This was the truth. I had spoken to her about it, and she made it clear that the only person she was interested in staying with was me. Judith's reaction was, well, as expected. She told me that, as a child, my daughter doesn't know what's in her best interest, but I should know better as a father. I told her that I knew exactly what was best for my daughter and didn't need her opinion on it. She said that she'll be at my doorstep tomorrow, and I'll have to either let her take my daughter with her or face the consequences. I proceeded to hang up on her. I already knew what to do. The next day, she did indeed show up at my door, but I wasn't there. I was at my neighbor's place next door. My daughter opened the door for Judith, and sure enough, after some time, I saw Judith's car drive away. I didn't know if my daughter left in it, but I prayed that things would go how I planned them to be and nothing would go wrong. It was around 11 o'clock in the morning when Judith left with my daughter, and from the moment they left, I waited for a call. I knew I would get eventually. It was an extremely stressful hour, but sure enough, just after 12, I got a call from a lady who said she was from CPS. She asked if I knew where my daughter was. I said that I was not home, and as far as I knew, my daughter should be at home. The lady told me that she had received a call from my daughter saying she was being kept at her grandmother's house against her wishes and wanted to check if I was aware of this. I said that I had been having some disagreements with my ex's mom, but never consented to my daughter going anywhere with her. I was then asked to visit a precinct where they had my daughter. I went there, and it was a whole mess. My daughter was there and ran to me. It's too complicated to get into, but well, after talking to everyone involved, my daughter, me, my ex's mom, my ex-wife, and her husband, it was clear that there was no instance of child abuse and this was a family matter. We were given a warning that if we caused my daughter any further mental or physical distress, there would be action against us, and that there may be welfare checks in my home. I tried to be as cooperative as possible and ensured that I wanted nothing more than my child's safety and well-being. My daughter was questioned by CPS officials, and though I don't know exactly what they talked about, my daughter told me that she said she was happy living with me and that her grandmother and mom were strangers to her, and she did not want to live with them. She was allowed to come back home with me, and I was, of course, extremely relieved. I met my ex-wife and her new husband at the precinct, though we didn't really talk. I only spoke to my ex's mom, and it was far from a friendly conversation. She told me that she knew I must have set up this whole thing and made my daughter call the cops, and that she wouldn't let it slide. She said that I had jeopardized everything and taken things too far, and that there would be consequences for my actions. I told her that I had no idea what she was talking about, that she should not have taken away my daughter without my permission, and I had no role in what happened after that. I left with my daughter, although I was grateful to have her with me. I was also scared of what those people may do in the future to take my daughter away from me again. After this, I don't think she will pull the whole charade of creating a false case against me because it will be pretty clear that they are just trying to get control over my daughter, but you never really know. My ex-wife did catch hold of me before I left though, and she said that I am being a terrible person and that my daughter needs to know a mother and grandmother's life, and I am depriving them of it. I initially did not want to exchange a single word with her, but lost my temper. I told her that she was no mother and had no right to say anything. She said that she is a better person now and just wanted to be there for our daughter. I left before she could manipulate me any further. Ever since then, I've been overthinking about what you said. Am I really being a bad father here for not letting my daughter have a relationship with her grandmother and mom? Date 1. Hey everyone. I've been trying my best to go through all your comments and texts about my post. There are some things I simply can't answer because I don't want anyone from my ex-wife's family to come across this post and then get me in trouble. The whole reason I am even posting on Reddit is because I know I can be as anonymous as I want. So, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that Judith has not caused any new trouble for me. I'm still on edge expecting something to happen, but so far, so good. Now for the bad news. Just a couple of days after the big incident, I was at home making dinner when I heard the doorbell. I checked the time, and it was too early for my daughter to be back from soccer practice. Figuring it was probably a delivery or maybe a neighbor dropping by, I casually made my way to answer it, but what I found on the other side was anything but casual. Standing before me with teary eyes was my ex-wife. I wish I was joking. My ex-wife, the one person I never expected to see at my doorstep ever again. To say I was shocked would be the understatement of the century. I couldn't believe she was there, in the house where we lived together after our marriage, where we brought my daughter home from the hospital, the same house where she left us all those years ago. For a moment, I was transported back to when my daughter was a baby, the time when we were still together, and trying desperately to save our marriage, and her getting colder and distant every day. Honestly, I didn't even know it was possible to go through so many emotions at once and in such a short time. It was crazy, but the emotion that emerged is the strongest out of all my confusion was anger. I was beyond angry at her. I had never gotten any closure for all these years, and here she was standing in front of me. I thought of how messy things would be if my daughter was home and if she had opened the door instead of me, and it just made me angrier. I asked her what she was doing there and if this was another attempt at taking my daughter away. She should go away before I called the cops on her. I had barely finished my sentence, and she just started crying. I'm talking about a seemingly endless stream of tears rolling down her face. Runny nose, choking up and all that. Before I could even gather my wits about me and even say anything, She launched into an emotional tirade begging me to hear her out at least once. I was extremely uncomfortable. I didn't want her in my house, but didn't feel great about the idea of a sobbing woman at my door for the whole neighborhood to watch. I thought I might regret it, but I asked her to come in. We sat down in the living room, and she just started pouring her heart out about why she was there. Her sudden appearance wasn't just a coincidence. To no one's surprise, she's tearing up telling me about all the moments she missed with our daughter. The sleepless nights spent regretting her choices, the whole 9 yards. I'm just sitting there being extremely confused. Why now, after all these years? She said that she had been having a difficult time in her life, which made her rethink her past and made her realize her mistakes. She told me that she and her husband were in debt, and they had lost everything. Their jobs, their house, their car, and they had nowhere to go and nothing to eat, which is why she came to Judith for help. She said they had hit rock bottom and realized their mistakes, and they wanted to change their lives and wanted to start with making it up to my daughter. She apologized to me several times and said that she understood what she did was awful, and I didn't have to forgive her, but she would love to get a chance to be in my daughter's life. She said that she would prove herself and be a good mom to my daughter and try to make up for all the lost time. I told her that I needed time to think about it, but couldn't promise her anything. It was time for my daughter to come back from soccer practice, and I didn't want her to walk into the house and see her mom crying. So I asked her to leave, and she thankfully agreed. I've been up all night thinking about what to do. Obviously, I haven't told my daughter anything about this, but I can't help but wonder if it's time to forgive. I just want to do what's best for my daughter, and I don't want to let my own negative feelings and hurt toward my wife get in the way of that. Maybe a co-parenting situation would not be the worst thing in the world. My opinion on this keeps changing, and I would appreciate any advice on it. Update 2. Some people never change, I guess. Sorry about the late update, guys, but I've been very busy. If you read my last update, you know that I was considering letting my ex be a part of my daughter's life again. I did a lot of soul searching and read comments from many of you guys who said that maybe I should give her another chance. So, I thought that maybe I could give it a try. I called her after a few days and told her that I would tell my daughter that she regrets her actions and wants another chance, and only if she agrees, I would consider co-parenting. She was obviously overjoyed and thanked me and said that she hoped her daughter would give her another chance. At that point, I was still not entirely happy about the situation and was only doing this to make my daughter happy. I was thinking of the perfect time to tell her all this. But let's just say I'm glad I waited. So, turns out that my ex-wife's sudden appearance wasn't just a moment of catharsis and inner remorse as she has tried to portray it. She came to me in desperation because her own mother was dangling her trust fund over her head like some sort of twisted bargaining chip. If my ex-wife doesn't somehow convince me and become a part of our daughter's life, her mom plans to cut her out of the fund entirely, leaving everything to her sister and nephew instead. So, some more context about Judith. She really hasn't been very popular with her kids. She comes from a rich family, and after my father-in-law passed away when my wife was a teenager, Judith got all his money as well. She has always been extremely controlling with both her daughters. My ex-wife has an older sister who literally moved halfway across the country the moment she turned 18 to get away from her control-freak mom. She was the same way as a grandmother. My ex-wife's sister, Emily, 38F, got married and had a son a few years before my daughter was born. Judith was absolutely insane with them. She used to show up at their house unannounced, questioned Emily's parenting, and basically did all that she could to make their entire family miserable. Emily put up with everything because Judith had a trust fund for Emily's daughter, but made it clear that she would have to be in her life if they wanted that money. She did the same when my daughter was born, but I did not care about the trust fund as much as Emily, and neither did my ex. So, when my ex abandoned me and my daughter, I had no desire to continue a relationship with Judith. Her threat of taking away the trust fund didn't mean much to me. I told myself that money was never there to begin with, and I much rather preferred my daughter to have a loving family instead of a toxic, controlling grandmother just for the sake of some money. When my ex-wife and her new guy lost everything they had due to his debt, they had no other option but to come to Judith for help. She agreed but had one condition. She wanted her only granddaughter, and wanted my ex to either get back with me or convince me to let them take my daughter to be raised by my ex and her husband. Now, my ex is a lot of things, but she isn't stupid. She knew that she would never have a chance at getting back together with me. So, when Judith's little intimidation tactic failed, she did the only thing she thought she could do. Try to make me feel sorry for her by pretending to have all this remorse about how she had acted in the past. I got to hand it to her. She was pretty convincing, but she made one mistake. She got too cocky. When I told her I'll consider co-parenting, and bragged to her sister about how she had managed to fool me even after all these years, Emily saw this as a threat. My ex-wife and daughter being in Judith's life obviously means that Emily and her kids won't be the only people in line for the family money. Also, if my ex got back on good terms with her mom, any future kid she had would also be in the line. So, Emily did what she thought would be the best way to safeguard her family's money. She reached out to me and told me everything. I feel extremely stupid for falling for this act. I am disgusted at the thought of her using our daughter just as a means of getting money. It's lucky that I found out about this before I told my daughter anything and got her hopes up. I've actually learned my lesson now though, and in the future, no one from that family will be allowed to come near me or my daughter ever again. Update 3. Some of you have been asking what I did or said to my ex after I found out the truth. Well, this might come as a disappointment, but I did nothing. I am done with this drama and just want to go back to my normal life before Judith made her appearance. I told my ex that I had changed my mind about co-parenting and that my daughter was not interested in getting to know her either. I've warned her to behave herself and keep Judith in line as well, because if they try to pull any stupid tricks again, I am not afraid to take the legal route anymore. Hopefully, none of their lot will bother me again. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My best friend attacked me over his crush on my girlfriend. So here's the story about me, my best buddy Jake, and my girlfriend Emma. Jake and I have been super tight since we were just little kids, like around 6 years old. We both dreamed of having the same kind of job when we grew up, which was pretty cool because we always had each other's backs. But man, getting there was tough. We faced a ton of rejections, and it felt like a real uphill battle. In the last year, though, things have started looking up for me. My career is finally taking off. I've been landing gigs and projects left and right, and it feels amazing to see my hard work paying off. But for Jake, it's been a different story. He's still struggling to catch his big break, and I can tell it's really getting him down. Despite my busy schedule, I've been doing everything I can to help Jake out. I've been his cheerleader, trying to pump him up, sharing tips, and even passing on opportunities to him. We were roommates for a while too, from when we were 22 to 23 years old. Those were good times. We shared pretty much everything, from pizza to playlists. But then, about 6 months ago, I started noticing a change in Jake. He began making these jokes at my expense, the kind that had a sting to them. He'd say things that were pretty belittling, and it felt like he was putting me down to make himself feel better. I've always been the kind of guy who tries to keep things light and breezy, so at first, I just shrugged it off. I figured he was just feeling a bit jealous or something because my career was doing well and his wasn't. I totally get how tough it is to see someone else succeeding in a field you're both passionate about. Now, talking about Emma, she's been my rock. We've been together for over 5 years, and she's been by my side through all the ups and downs of trying to make it in our competitive field. Emma and I have this great connection where we can talk about absolutely everything, whether it's something big like career moves or just everyday stuff. We share it all. I really value that openness and honesty in our relationship. To keep things exciting between us, I make sure to plan fun activities. We go out on dates once or twice a week, where I might surprise her with something special like a cooking class, a dance lesson, or even a quick getaway trip. I love creating these new experiences for us to enjoy together, diving into her hobbies, and making sure she knows she's my number one. Even with my career taking off, I've been careful to keep our relationship a priority because I know how important it is to balance work with personal life. I guess what I'm trying to say is that life has been pretty good, except for the tension with Jake. I thought I was managing everything well. My job, my relationship with Emma, and my friendship with Jake. But as you'll see, things got pretty complicated really fast. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I rebuilt my life after my husband abandoned me without explanation. 7 years later, he wants to reconnect, but I'm happily married. So yesterday, I, 32F, found myself in a situation that had never even come across my mind. My ex-husband, Eric, 34M, is trying to reconnect with me after 7 years of complete radio silence. It's bringing up a lot of memories and feelings that I thought I had dealt with so many years ago. Eric and I met during our freshman year in college. We joined the campus environmental club, which was quite active. One time, this freshman guy stood on one of the makeshift stages we had put up at the rally, with his voice seething with conviction about climate change. He was so very passionate, and I found myself falling for him. We were friends first, making events and posters, arguing about environmental policies that seemed like they went on for hours. That all transitioned into romance as our junior year approached. It seemed to happen without thought, just about when it would have. One evening, a star-studded sky broke out overhead as we walked back toward the dorms after a particularly successful fundraising event. Eric stopped, turned to me, and simply said, "I think I'm in love with you." My heart seemed to miss a beat, and I realized the very same fact, that I loved him too. It was hard, you know. From the very inception, we were young and idealistic and madly in love. We got married just after graduation in a beautiful outdoor ceremony. Our vows included not just to love one another but to make the world a better place. Looking back, this seems almost comically naive, but at the time it felt right. The first years of our marriage went pretty well. We both found jobs in our field. I worked for a nonprofit dealing with sustainable agriculture, and Eric found a job with an environmental law firm. We were busy, but we were happy, still very much in love, still working toward our goals. Things changed for us in the 4th year of marriage. Eric's law firm took a case against a huge corporation that had broken the law about dumping toxic waste. The case became everything to Eric. He was at the office almost every night, often until 2 in the morning. I felt proud of his dedication but lonely on the inside. We grew further apart. Our conversations began to shorten, the activities we did together even fewer. It was during this time that my childhood best friend, Alex, 32M, came back into my life. Alex and I grew up next door to each other. We were the best of friends as kids, able to always find trouble. His family moved away in high school, and though we swore to stay in contact often, life gets in the way. Alex communicated with me over social media and told me he got a job interview scheduled to be in town. I really looked forward to the trip to rekindle an old friendship. We set a date for his visit to our place since Eric was supposed to be working late that day. It was one of those days packed with laughter and nostalgia. The day Alex arrived at the house, we sat on the couch flipping through photo albums, reliving most of the adventures we had during our early childhood. I felt lighter than I had in months, my mind temporarily off the growing distance between Eric and me. That is when Eric stepped in. I believed he must have come back early from work to surprise me, but he actually was the one surprised. The look on his face when he saw Alex and me on the couch was a one-of-a-kind that I have kept in my mind for life. He looked at us shocked and hurt and quickly stormed out before I could explain. I called Eric 2 or 3 times that evening, but he didn't answer. He didn't come home. I woke up in the morning only to find papers on the kitchen table demanding divorce. I felt so hurt and shocked, considering that Eric could take such a big step without even wanting to listen to what I had to say. I did absolutely everything possible for the next month to get to Eric, called, texted, and even sent emails. I contacted his friends and family, but everywhere he had blocked me. Even Alex tried to call him to clear up most of the misunderstanding, but Eric wouldn't hear it. And after a month of numerous attempts, I finally understood that Eric wasn't going to hear me out. In pain and anger, I decided not to fight the divorce. The next 2 months were the worst in my life. I left our apartment and moved in with my friend Sarah, 31F. I had to sleep on her couch while I was looking for a new job in my own place. I quit my job after we got married. The reason was that Eric wanted me to have time to build our home. Now that I think about it, just how naive was I for giving up my independence so easily? Sarah was quite literally a godsend at this time. She was my college roommate briefly before I went to live with Eric, and she instantly opened up her house to me. I spent many nights on her couch crying and trying to make sense of how my life had fallen apart so quickly, and she listened patiently, offering advice when I asked for it, and reminded me more than anything that I was strong enough to get through this. Took me almost a year, but I got up again. I was employed as a marketing coordinator at a small firm that dealt with the promotion of eco-friendly products. Although it was not environmental work proper, as was my dream, it did enable me to use my skills and make a positive contribution to society. I also got a small studio apartment. Not a big one, but it was mine, and the pride and independent achievement were mine. Rebuilding my life, I was heavily involved with work over the next few years and quickly moved from coordinator to manager. I had new sets of friends through work in the local hiking club that I had joined. I took up painting as a hobby, something that I always had wanted to try but seemed never to be able to find time for when Eric and I were together. I was casually dating then, no commitments. The experience with Eric scared me off from commitments. It was only 3 years ago at a work conference that I felt I would open my heart again when I met David, 35M. David was unlike all the other men I had ever dated. He was sensitive, he understood things, he was quietly self-assured in a way that proved incredibly attractive. He worked as an architect engaged in sustainable design. We bonded on environmental issues just like with Eric, but it wasn't the whole world. David and I took it very slow. We were dating for a full year before we even started talking about moving in together. He never pushed his case on me right from the beginning. He respected my space and independence. We did move in together, and this time it felt right. We got married last year in a small ceremony with our closest friends and family. It was different from my wedding day with Eric. Smaller, more intimate, and somehow more real. Life was good until last week when I got a friend request on Facebook from Eric. I thought he did that years ago, and so I was surprised by this friend request. Curiosity got the better of me, and I accepted the request. Almost immediately afterward, I received a very long message from him. He said in the message that he had bumped into Alex at a common friend's wedding recently. Alex had told him what really had happened that day 7 years ago. He feels awful for jumping to conclusions without even giving me a chance to explain. He apologized for what he did and said that he regretted his act all these years. He said he now lives in our old hometown and wanted to get together to apologize in person and to catch up. He said he was single and that he hadn't stopped thinking of me at all. I was speechless. 7 years of no communication, and now Eric wanted just to walk back into my life like nothing happened. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was angry that he had taken so long to realize his mistake, but another part of me was curious about what he had to say. I haven't replied to Eric's message yet. I told David about it, and he has been very supportive, saying it is up to me if I want to meet Eric or not. I am torn. On one hand, I have moved on with my life, and I'm happy with David. On the other hand, there is this tiny part of me that wants closure. I don't know what to do. Should I meet Eric and hear him out? Or should I ignore his message and move on with my life as it is now? Any advice will be welcome. Update 1. Thank you all for your invaluable advice and support. Reading through all your comments and after some thoughts over for the last couple of days, I decided to reply to the letter of Eric. This made short into the points. I replied that I was glad for the apology but that bygones had been bygones and that I was happily married and saw no reason for the two of us to meet up or renew any kind of relationship, not even that of friends. I thought that was it, but no, he immediately responded saying he understood but he really wanted to meet just once in order to apologize in person. He said he had so much to say and just couldn't do it justice over a message. I didn't reply to this message in the hope he would take the hint, but over the next few days, Eric sent several more messages. Each one became increasingly emotional and desperate. In one message, he said he had never stopped loving me, and that meeting Alex had awakened feelings he had been trying to suppress for years. One message struck out in my mind. Eric had written about the night of our first date, one that I nearly forgot. We had plans to go to a very classy restaurant together, but when the time came, we went there and found it closed for some renovation. Not one to give up totally, we ended up at this small pizza place. Really more of a hole in the wall, and we just sat there for hours talking and laughing, simply not concerning ourselves with what the time was. One time, Eric once told me it was then that he realized he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. The message had me taking quite a trip down memory lane for a moment. I was in the clouds, rejoicing over all the good times we had shared. He could have at least trusted me enough to talk about what he had seen. I showed all those messages to David, who was quite rightly very concerned. We agreed that I should block Eric on Facebook so that he wouldn't be able to contact me anymore. I did this thinking that would be the end of it. Well, days later, I got a bouquet of roses in the workplace with a card from Eric. He said he was sorry for the Facebook bombardment and that he really just wanted a chance to talk. He left his phone number on the card. I was really shocked and afraid. I had never mentioned my place of work to Eric, so he must have made some inquiries to that effect. The roses also looked very much like the ones he used to buy for me when we were married, a particular variety that once I happened to mention I liked. I informed my boss, Maria, 45F, on the spot. Maria and I get along fairly well. She had been really understanding when I was going through my divorce years ago. She was very understanding about this situation and said she would alert security to not let Eric in the building if he showed up. The evening after David and I discussed much of what was happening, we did feel that the ignoring was no longer an effective strategy, and it was about time to try some more direct approach. David wanted to do the talk with Eric himself, and I was hesitant as I felt that this would only make matters worse. Finally, we both decided that I would place another call to Eric, this time to clearly tell him to stop contacting me. I called Eric the following day from my office. When he answered, he sounded all animated, but I cut him off before he had much of a chance to say anything. I told him in no uncertain terms that his behavior was inappropriate and bordering on harassment. I made it very clear that I was now happily married and had no interest in revisiting any kind of relationship with him in any way. A few times, Eric tried to interrupt me to say something, but I continued to speak further. He spoke of new memories from our past, our first apartment together, the stray cat that the two of us had adopted, the future we had mapped out. But every memory he said only reassured me of what I knew to be true. Those were part of a past that was long gone. I warned him that if he ever dared to call me again or reach out to me in any way, shape, or form without my permission, I would have him dealt with by the authorities. I hung up after telling him that should he find he just couldn't stand it without me, to get help, but to leave me out of it. This conversation made me wanting to cry and to think how wrong I had been. After the phone call, I could not really decide if I felt relieved or sad. It was good at that moment, for once, to have voiced my opinion clearly and stood my ground. Sad for the young, naive girl of long ago who had her life turned upside down because of Eric's accusations and lack of communication. It's been a week. I still haven't heard from Eric since that phone call. Anyway, I hope it ends with this, but yes, David and I have made plans concerning steps to take in case Eric tries contacting me again. That would include changing my phone number and making our home more secure. This whole situation makes me realize how much, in reality, over a span of 7 long years, I have grown. The old me would have been tempted to meet Eric to gain his approval or forgiveness. But now I know my worth, and I don't want to allow absolutely anybody to shake the life I've built for myself, least of all Eric. David has been great about all this. His constant support and understanding have kept us even stronger. We're planning a weekend getaway next month to relax and put this whole situation behind us. I'll update again if anything else happens, but I'm really hoping this is the last that I will have to deal with Eric. Thanks again for being here for me. Update 2. When it has been nearly a month since my last post, and unfortunately, I have worse news to add to my case. Just when things seemed like they had reached a dead end, something totally unexpected happened with Eric. 2 weeks later, he dropped an email, dilating from another email address he had opened due to my blocking every communication tool he had. His email stated that he was truly sorry for his actions but that he still could not give up on us easily. He went on to claim that he had even visited a therapist over his problems and that he was now a changed man. He really poured his heart out in an email, writing about what was between us before, the college projects on the environment, the dreams we shared about the future. He even told the story of the case he was working on when our marriage came undone, stress at work clouding his judgment. He even talked about the house we were going to buy, an old fixer-upper with a huge backyard where we were supposed to start a garden. The more I read them, the more I gently caressed the screen, and a sad smile found its place on my lips. For a moment, I remembered Eric with a zeal, someone who had ambition, whose eyes beamed with all the wild currents of the storm of dreams regarding the future. And then I remember the one who has just walked out on me without an answer, the one who refused to listen to my explanations. I never replied to the email. I forwarded it to Dave, and we agreed to record everything just in case of further action. We also decided to change my email address, take out a new one, and ramp up the privacy settings on all my social media accounts. A week later, during one evening as I was done working, I saw Eric while leaving. He just stood close to my car in the parking lot. At that moment, I felt my heart was racing, and for some seconds, I stood there frozen. But thank God, my coworker Lisa was with me at that time. She had given me her attention and asked whether everything was fine. I filled her in on everything that was going on, and she offered to walk with me to the car. As we approached Eric, he started coming toward us. Lisa, bless her, steps in front of me and starts telling Eric to back off or she was going to bring security here to throw his ass out. Eric was now looking very surprised at the fact I did not come alone. He mumbled about only wanting to talk and quickly left. I was horrified by the experience. Lisa demanded she be up until David arrived to take me back home. I narrated everything to David, and we all realized that now was the moment to take serious action. The next day, we went to the police station to make a complaint about him. The officer in front said he was nice, kind of rude, and that he hadn't really done anything that was actually illegal so far, except he can be prosecuted for stalking. They listened to our information and gave me direction on what to do if Eric persists in contacting me. Another step we took was meeting with an attorney who specialized in stalking cases. She recommended that we send a letter ordering him to cease contact. The letter was mailed certified so we could prove Eric had received it. The letter would have secured us a few days of respite, but Eric came over to our place last Saturday. David and I were at the backyard when the doorbell rang. David entered to attend to the door, and I could hear some animated conversations. I entered to find out what was happening, and David was at the door asking Eric to please leave. When Eric saw me, he began pushing past David. David, who is normally the calmest person I know, started physically pushing Eric back and told him that if he didn't leave immediately, he would call the police. Eric looked at me beseechingly, but I stood firm behind David. Finally, Eric left, but not before shouting that he would never give up on us. We called the police the minute Eric left the house. They have taken our statement, including the cease and desist letter and all the documentation we have regarding Eric's attempts to contact me. The officers have said that they will try to locate Eric and have a talk with him. This incident makes us feel insecure and unsafe in our own house now. We are really considering moving, even though it's our dream house, and we love the area. We have also looked into home security systems and cameras. I'm angry that Eric is going to take our lives and make them different. I'm angry that after all of this, he still thinks he has a right to me, but mostly I'm scared. I do not have a clue how far Eric might go, and that not knowing is what's so bloody scary. David's been my rock through all this. He's taken time off of work to spend with me. He has been constantly on the phone with the police, our attorney, and we are just taking it one day at a time, hoping that he will finally get the hint to leave us alone. I'll update again if there are any significant developments. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. Update 3. I really must say it's been a couple of months since my last update, but by now, some level of peace has finally been restored. The police were able to find Eric after he came to our house and gave him quite a lecture. They warned him and told him that if there were any further contacts from him, he faced the music. It seems the police intervention finally got through to Eric. From that day, he never called or came unexpectedly. Not a word. We are all relieved, yet on our nerves. We went ahead and installed the security system, complete with a couple of cameras around the house. David and I discussed the matter and determined that we would not move from our residence. We cherish our dwelling and did not appreciate Eric's succeeding in running us out of the neighborhood. We did make a couple of changes in our life patterns. I started carpooling with my coworker Lisa to and from the employment office, and David arranged to alter his work hours so that he would be present at our home when I returned. The entirety of the experience was an eye-opener. It made me realize the amount of residual anger I had not resolved with Eric regarding our marriage's failure. I find that I feel the need to see a therapist to work it all out and to process the stress from the recent events. It happened in one of my therapy sessions when the penny dropped. I had been holding on to this idealized Eric from college, this passionate, idealistic young man with whom I fell in love. Little did I know that this person was gone, lost in battle, replaced by another whom I no longer know or trust. Being able to realize this helped me rid myself of the last lingering attachments that held me to our past. David and I are actually closer now than before. The protection and support of my man have given me a feeling of what partnership really means. We have had numerous long conversations about our relationship and what is to come in our future. We even started discussing a family, something I wasn't so sure about after Eric, but now it feels right with David. Things in the office are back to usual. My boss, Maria, has been quite accommodating, understanding with all the happenings. She even gave me a shot to work on this new project about sustainable practices in local businesses, returning me to working on the environment. Lisa, a work friend of mine who squared up to Eric in the parking lot, has been one of my best friends. We grab lunch all the time, and she has been an excellent listener when I need just to release some steam about the situation. I am cautiously optimistic about the future. While I hope it's the last I've heard of Eric, I'm better prepared than the previous time he contacted me. Now I work on my marriage, my career, and my mental health. We are going to take a vacation with David next month. We will go for a hike in the mountains. We really think it will be nice to get a break for a while, come closer to nature and each other, as friends can do without the nightmare of recent events. When I think back on it, I can't fail to be proud of how much I've improved. The scared, broken woman who slept on Sarah's couch 7 years ago does really seem quite a different person now. I feel stronger, more self-assured, and much more supported than ever before. Thank you all for your support throughout this challenging time. Your words of advice and kindness have indeed been a strength. Hopefully, this will be my last blog entry on this fiasco, and I will just be able to move forward without any more interruptions from my past. Here's to new beginnings and the power of moving on. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My best friend gave her boyfriend permission to sleep with me behind my back. Okay, so this may be a long one. First and foremost, I am not down to read any poly shaming. That's not the point of this post. Polyamory is a valid dating relationship model when done ethically, and I am laying that down first and foremost. Any advice given that has the air of, but poly is gross straight up, I'm gonna keep on scrolling past and not take in. So, my best friend Cindy and I have known each other roughly 15 years and have been roommates for 5-ish years. Cindy is poly and has 2 partners. One that lives close by and one named Mark that lives in Oregon, which is pretty far from us. I knew Mark through mutual friends prior to him meeting Cindy, and we actually slept together a couple of times back in like 2016. He's poly and I am monogamous, and we decided it wouldn't work between us, but we maintain being good friends because we get along really well. I introduced those two in 2017, admittedly under the he's poly, you're poly piss poor attempt to matchmake, and they hit it off. In 2019, Mark had to move to Oregon for work, but they have been making it work via long distance, and I'm happy for them. So, in 2020, I kind of lost my mind. I had to break up with a boyfriend who was in love with someone else. I realized I hated my job. I turned 30 and felt deeply unhappy with where my life was headed. So, I decided it was best for me to start living. I quit my job, found a new one that made me happy, and I started to do solo hiking adventures. I mentioned in a group chat that I always wanted to camp in Crater Lake National Park in Oregon, and Mark offered his place for me to stay at and offered to be my hiking buddy. He's into hiking as well. Cindy hates camping/hiking/sun/nature, but was excited for us to have fun and even helped me plan the trip, until 2 weeks ago. Out of nowhere, Cindy was as cold as ice to me. We take turns cooking, and suddenly on her nights to cook, she would only make one portion and leave me nothing. She was short in conversation, didn't want to hang out with me in shared areas at all, and just seemed like she was pissed. I asked her if something was wrong, and she straight up ignored me. I went to mutual friends who said they had no clue that something was wrong. Then yesterday, she invited me to a video chat with her and Mark. They told me they've discussed it, and I have permission to sleep with Mark on this trip. Apparently, one of the boundaries in their relationship is neither of us can do anything with either of our partner's friends. Mark mentioned 2 weeks prior that he would be down to sleep with me on this trip if I was down for it, which led to fighting between the two. Mark argued that he already slept with me previously, so I shouldn't count, and Cindy was sternly on, she's my best friend, so no. They reached an agreement and were excited to tell me, and I blew up at them. So many thoughts are swirling in my head right now, and I cannot even verbalize all the reasons why I am mad. It's like my best friend and her boyfriend, someone I consider to be a good friend too, view me as a sex object in some ways, but somehow worse. Sleeping with Mark wasn't even a concept to me, as he is squarely in the best friend's boyfriend and good friend boxes in my mind. I logged off the chat, told Cindy I was too angry to look at her, and have been at a friend's place for the last day. I need advice on how to convey to them when I'm so angry, when I'm having trouble coming up with a reason besides blind rage. I barely want to go on this trip anymore. Edit. I think where the shock and hurt is coming from is mostly the fact that I have been treated like a trash for the past 2 weeks in my own home for an issue that, if anyone asked me, I could have ended with a quick, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Mark is a good friend, and while he was a fun sexual partner like 5 years ago, he is squarely my roomie's boyfriend in my mind, and even with this permission, I wouldn't sleep with him. I am mad that Cindy treated me this way. I am frustrated at the apparent brainlessness on both their ends of not just talking to me. I'm annoyed that my sexual potential was discussed in depth by both of them. I'm kind of upset that a good friend may have only invited me to stay over at his place for the potential of banging me. I'm pissed off that I am sleeping on a FNG futon like a 21-year-old because, even though Cindy was in the wrong, I left my apartment when she should have left. OT, I just have a lot going on emotionally at the moment. Mini update. Okay. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who commented. Today has been rough for the most part. But me and the friend whose futon I am occupying got tacos, and I got to process this for the better part of my day. My feelings have landed mostly on being upset with Cindy. No matter what drama was going on in their relationship, I was treated like a pariah in my own goddamn home, and that's unacceptable. The annoying part of this is now I'm doubting whether or not I would have even considered sleeping with Mark if the situation came up organically. My friend who I'm staying at, she's also poly. I am one of the few mono people in my immediate friend group, hence why I was really harsh in my post about not accepting poly hate because those are my people. They asked me how I would have preferred the situation playing out. My response was pretty much, 1. Cindy not taking out whatever she was feeling on me while they were having their backroom discussion. 2. Being approached by one of them individually to see if I was interested in any of this, and not in the weirdest Discord call in the world. She was in the room right next to me. She could have just come in and talked to me solo. If Mark would have asked me, I probably would have run to Cindy being like, your boyfriend is hitting on me. I am unsure if that's even allowed. If Cindy would have Christ on the cross, I am unsure how that would have even gone. Who knows? Maybe with permission and wine and the breathtaking views of that lake. Seriously, ignore me and Google Crater Lake National Park. It's Gorg. Something would have happened. Nothing sure as hell is going to happen now, though. This is a long-winded post to say that I am planning to talk to each of them one-on-one because, at the end of the day, I already dropped like $450 on round-trip tickets, and I can't afford to stay anywhere else on short notice. I've looked into campsites, lodges, and nearby Airbnbs and hotels, and everything is too expensive for me, and my PTO is already approved in my workbooks. I am not going to be awkwarded out of my vacation that I have dreamed about. I am going to talk to them both. And God help them if the first words out of their mouths aren't, I'm sorry. Final update. Hey everyone. It's been just over 3 weeks since my last post, and I wanted to post an update. If you didn't read my original post, it's that I was planning on going on a trip where I would be staying with my best friend's partner for 5 days. She was fine with it until she wasn't and treated me coldly for 2 weeks. Then she and her BF told me that I had permission to sleep with the BF on the trip if I so desired. I got pissed and stayed at a friend's place for 3 days. It was such a fun experience. I went home after 2 or 3 days, I can't actually remember how long I was gone now. When Cindy sent me a message saying she wanted to apologize, apparently Cindy reached out to the mutual friend I was staying with, and that friend went over every cruel thing Cindy did to me during her 2 weeks of shutting me out and told her to get herself together. We sat down and talked, and it was pretty illuminating what she had to say. Cindy and I have known each other for over 15 years now. For the majority of that time, I was the more introverted and shy type, while she was the drink shots on the roof with this new friend I made 30 seconds ago type. When the plague hit, we both had two very different responses. After realizing I was deeply unhappy with all parts of my life, I flipped everything on its head. I found a new job and made a bunch of work friends. I started doing solo adventures. I felt happier than I'd ever been, and it turns out happy me is very bubbly and engaging. While I couldn't go out for obvious reasons, I started actually using Discord and engaging more with friends and going on virtual dates. Cindy did the opposite. Her job went work from home pretty early on, which cut her off from most of her work friends, and she lost an aunt she was close to due to the virus. Cindy works customer service at an online store, so after 8 hours on the phone in front of a computer, she doesn't want to Zoom or Discord or message anyone from the exhaustion of it all. Cindy admitted that she felt like she was falling apart. Meanwhile, the person she grew up with was doing better than ever. Cindy is not one to express her feelings. She comes from an army what's a feeling family. Apparently, she decided that the best course of action was to bury everything in her chest and do nothing about it. Then Mark asked if he could sleep with me, and everything started leaking out. Cindy admitted that the rule neither of us can do anything with either of our partner's friends is a bit more flexible than I originally thought, and is more of a please ask if I am cool with this before you flirt with my friends situation. Apparently, Cindy was cool with the concept of us sleeping together previously, back in 2019. I was planning a trip to Seattle for the summer of 2020. Mark offered to join me, and we were planning on splitting a 2-bedroom Airbnb. It didn't happen for obvious reasons, but apparently Mark asked Cindy during the planning stage if he could even bro the topic with me, and she was cool with it. Mark, going off how she was previously cool with it, checked in again with her before he was planning on talking to me about it for the most recent trip, and that's when the blow-up happened. Cindy apologized for how she treated me the past 2 weeks and admitted that she felt like she was failing at everything in her day-to-day life and then felt like she was going to lose her boyfriend to me if something happened between us. I honestly feel like a shitty friend in some sense because, while I knew her depression was flaring up again, I didn't quite realize how deep she was in it, despite living together. I did stand my ground on the fact that, while her feelings are valid, the way she treated me wasn't, and that type of behavior cannot happen again. She agreed and even invited me to sit in on a session with her therapist she was already going to cope with the feelings in regards to her very messy family, which I said I would after she had more solo time to process it. I did end up going on the trip. Mark apologized for blowing up my home with his question, and we had a conversation about how, while he is sweet, I really don't see any future where I sleep with him again. He was with it and said he was excited to have a good friend come up for nature adventures. I just got home yesterday from my adventures, and I've been sharing the photos with Cindy for the better part of the day. She thinks the shots are beautiful, and her biggest concern is that I could have hurt my lungs since it was pretty smoky out there on one of the days I was out there due to wildfires in Cali. So that's it. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.